Hi, my name is Felix and I got typed in the objective personality system as a double feminine TISE consume sleep play blast about 3 years ago. So in other words, I'm an ISTP.
And I'm Holly. I was typed in the objective personality system about 2 years ago, and my type is visual TENE, play, consume, sleep, blast, so otherwise known as an ESTJ. Now, we are both thinkers, which means that we both have feeling at the bottom, and in our case, we both have feminine feeling at the bottom.
Yep.
This also means that we both carry these kind of fake stories in our mind that tells us that negative feelings are not acceptable in either ourselves or others.
Not allowed.
Not allowed. So I think it's easy to imagine that this is cause for disaster eventually.
We'll explain more closely how our types could clash in a second, but these setups could lead to a huge, really disastrous conflict. In this video, we want to talk about how we navigate this conflict by using the knowledge of our types, how these patterns work, also using awareness of our feelings and internal states, and really the language that the objective personality system gives us to resolve these conflicts and actually use them as a possibility to, or an opportunity to be vulnerable and to connect on a deeper level.
Yeah. So I said before that we both have demon feminine feeling at the bottom. So that automatically means that we both have masculine thinking at the top. Yes, exactly, like that. So what does that look like for me as a lead masculine TE? I know I find myself constantly looking at what other people are doing. And I'm always thinking, how can I do more work for them? What can I do for them to make their day and their lives easier? That is what my focus is on. But the problem is that the voice in my head is always telling me that if I don't do enough, then I'm no longer going to be valuable and I will eventually be replaced, which I know is completely ridiculous. I tell myself that I'm not allowed to have my own personal problems at work. Just do not take your personal problems to work. That is a no-go. And I'm also not allowed to, as a thinker, have any unresolved problems. Now, this is because I feel like my value is in the TE, and if I can't do the TE well and solve the problems, then I'm not valuable.
For me as a lead TI, it feels overall very similar, but my focus isn't on others, it's on me. And I just want to describe the default mindset. It isn't actually that extreme, but I'm just trying to give an idea here. So I constantly have this nagging voice that I need to be better, I need to go get ahead, I need to be smarter, I need to improve myself. And this is constant, this is vicious, this is putting me under so much pressure. And really, I have this need to be right, I have this need to be correct. Yeah, Holly suffers from that too.
Yeah.
I'm constantly looking for problems to solve. For the harder the better, because I do want to prove myself with them. And this is also what really makes me thrive, like finding hard problems, working on hard problems for a long time, really invigorates me in some way. And if I can avoid it, I don't necessarily want anyone to help me. I just want to solve it on my own.
You don't want my help.
Not if I can. No, it's good.
Hey.
No, but what I'm ultimately looking from the tribe, as ridiculous as that sounds, is to just get the recognition and the significance for having done hard work on my own.
Yeah. So what is my fake story that I tell myself around feelings and emotions? I tell myself that showing emotions is a sign of weakness. I also tell myself that emotions aren't good for solving any kind of problem, that we don't actually need them. I also tell myself that if I show other people what I care about, then that makes me a target. Now, this is probably more in relation to my masculine DE, but it just kind of feels like if I share my FI, then I'm too vulnerable. And what I'm ultimately afraid of is that I just won't be accepted if I do share that with other people.
For me, as someone with feminine FE last, it's ultimately still very similar. Just my feeling problems are more outward focused, I would say. So I'm really afraid of negative feelings between me and others, like within the tribe. What I want, what I kind of only feel really comfortable with are positive emotions, a good, nice vibe. And yeah, I'm really also very much afraid to get rejected by the tribe, that the tribe gets angry at me, that the tribe doesn't want me, that I don't get the recognition, that I'm not accepted. And when negative feelings come up, and it's of course when and not if, I'm very much afraid to deal with them. When they come up within myself, I'm afraid to express them, to kind of poison the vibe. But I also have a hard time dealing with them if others are in a bad state. I don't know what to do. I feel like these feelings shouldn't be there. I don't want to have them. I don't want to deal with them. And as terrible as that sounds, I do, by default, if I'm not careful, do judge others for being in a bad state. I judge myself even more harshly for being in a bad state and just try to argue the bad feelings away, which is great and works ultimately very well, always.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So what we just described is really our default mindset. It's the fake stories that we tell ourselves that are kind of inherent in our minds for whatever reason. We know about that, but it doesn't mean we're conscious of it in the moment.
No.
It can be really tough. And these fake stories, in our case, can feed each other in the worst way. Like one of us might be in a bad state for whatever reason. Usually it doesn't have anything to do with us and our relationship.
Nope.
And then the other judges them for it and wants to argue it away. And essentially it tells the other that your fake story is actually true. You're actually not allowed to express your negative feelings. And this can have horrible, horrible consequences.
Now, unfortunately, what this does is that the person who is hurt will often end up blaming the other person for the reason why they're hurt and why they're feeling triggered or offended or whatever it is that they might be feeling.
Yeah, and they just feel even more hurt than they do anyway already.
Yeah, exactly. And they might just look for reasons to blame the other person. And obviously this is where the lead thinker comes in. You are looking for reasons for why the other person is in the wrong.
So how do we deal with that? How do we get out of this huge mess? So I think the first step is really awareness.
Yep.
That we have practice or whatever, we are able to notice, okay, we are in a bad state. We are triggered. What is going on? We notice that we're hurt. And then the next step is really that we are aware and that we understand that we're not reacting to what's actually happening. We're reacting to our interpretation of what's happening. It's not actually the outside world that hurts us. It's our own mind it's our own fake story where the hurt comes from. And we understand that. And together with the awareness of our negative state, this allows us to pull back, to not keep blaming.
Yeah, and I also just want to add to that this process, at least for me, doesn't happen in the moment. I'm very much not at the stage where I can sort of take that step back in the moment. It often happens a little bit later, but still able to kind of make that separation between what is actually happening and my interpretation of what is happening.
Yeah, and for me, it's usually never immediate, but it's often early enough so the bad moments don't go too far.
Yep, I think that's really important.
And the next step is to realize that we really are triggered because our interpretation is wrong. We are not aligned with the universe and how reality works, and we need to sort that out and find the actual truth.
So when we realize that we have been triggered, we need to pull back and essentially process what has happened. We also need to kind of look into if what we believe to be true is actually not true, then some form of the opposite must actually be true. So we need to use our types to understand what the fake stories are that we're telling ourselves that are not true and not real.
Yeah, and consider different possibilities that are the opposite in some form.
Exactly.
So of course, then the first step is to stop arguing, to stop block banging, because that never got anyone anywhere.
But that's not always easy.
That's not always
easy.
easy.
Easy to turn that off.
No, it really is an addiction. And I think, being aware that we are addicted to that kind of blind reaction is also part of the process, to be humble that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then after we stopped arguing and processed a little bit and investigated what kind of opposite might be true, we also tell our story. We tell how we feel from our subjective perspective, but we really communicate explicitly that, hey, this is just the story I tell myself. This is not the truth. I know that this is not the truth. Let me just explain where I'm coming from and investigate why I feel that way. And we try to be as vulnerable and as open as possible, and we try to listen to each other as best we can.
Yeah, actually, I think Shan talks about her brain. She said that when she knows that something is happening that's not actually true, she refers to her brain as being something separate to herself.
Yeah, the storyteller.
Yeah.
I think the point is that there is a separate entity in your head or in your mind that creates these stories. And this entity isn't actually you. It's kind of just a part of you. And story tells isn't necessarily true.
And you can choose to believe it or not.
Yes. Yeah, you can choose to let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we also realize that navigating these kinds of negative emotions is really hard for us, and we give ourselves and each other like the time and the space that we need to process it.
Yeah, especially for me having FI and having FI at the bottom and blast last, actually talking about how I feel is incredibly difficult and I really have to kick myself to do it. I don't want to share how I feel. Just kind of feels like I'm not allowed, but we know that through talking about these things, it almost instantly resolves the issue as soon as you talk about it.
Yeah, at least it's definitely like a big step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And let's pressure out. And I think for me, I think it's a bit easier for me to just start talking it out, whatever I'm feeling right
Yeah.
now. But then I also need to be careful not to put too much pressure on you right now to talk everything out.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you don't do that. Because that wouldn't end well. So what happens when we do all these things is that we realize that the conflict actually opens the pathway to connection. It actually helps us connect better. We also kind of understand what limiting beliefs we might have, what ridiculous stories we might be telling ourselves about, things happening in the world and about ourselves and how other people might see us.
Yeah, it really helps us that we understand ourselves better through this process of getting triggered and resolving that, and we understand each other better and connect on a deeper level.
Yeah, and we become closer overall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we want you guys to take away from this is that if we can do it, then you can definitely do it. It just takes a little bit of time and practice, but keep going and you'll get there.